Hello everybody, here we are today and we are doing a season preview for the Philadelphia Flyers. Now before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel. That being said, let's get on into it. So the Flyers are a team that last season you figured would do better than the season prior because the season prior to last season was a dumpster fire. And they did do better, but ultimately it was another season, one of many seasons, or I should say multiple seasons, where they weren't able to play playoff hockey. And now we're wondering, what are some storylines for this club going into this season? The first one in my mind is, what does the GM Daniel Briere have in mind for the club? Well, I think it's kind of interesting, and I think this is one of the big talking points for this team going forward. Briere ended up taking over as the GM back in March, if I'm not mistaken, and has already made a big decision for the club going forward. And this is something that I'm very anxiously watching out for. He is a younger GM and obviously has ties to the organization, played with them for 6 seasons and then didn't retire that long ago and has worked his way up the NHL ladder pretty quick and is now taking over for a side that he saw in the Stanley Cup final while he was playing for them back in 2010. And my question, I guess, is how does he want to get them back to the Stanley Cup and win it? Now, obviously, every single GM wants to win the Stanley Cup, but you have different approaches. Are you going to try to be a little bit more aggressive, or are you going to go the slow burn approach? We saw the former GM, Chuck Fletcher, go a little bit more aggressive to try to keep this team competitive, and that didn't necessarily work probably the way you were hoping for, so you got to watch out for that. In my opinion, we've already really seen what Briere wants to do, and I think it's more of the slow approach, clean house a little bit, and get in some younger guys, some younger talent, and try to build from the ground up. Obviously, a big piece of this was the Provorov trade to the Blue Jackets, which was interesting because a lot of people say, why would you trade within the division to have an interdivisional team play yourself? Maybe it's intra-divisional, I can never remember. Anyway, the point remains to trade a big piece of your blue line over to a team that you're going to be playing multiple times a year, and it's going to be a team that directly impacts your standings, 4 games you're going to play them. I think it really comes down to he doesn't care. He knows that this is a club that's not going to win the Stanley Cup next season. Spoiler alert, if you were watching this and expecting a Stanley Cup, it's a little wild, but anyway, he does seem to want to take his time and do things the right way. And my opinion is this: do you want to be compared to Chuck Fletcher at the end of the day, or you want to try to make something more and try to be up there with Keith Allen? And Allen was the GM for the Flyers when they ended up winning those 2 Stanley Cups back in the 70s. Briere probably wants to be up there with Allen as one of just 2 GMs to win the Stanley Cup with the Flyers. And for Briere, I really think it's just going to be, again, focusing on what his groundworks are, what his blueprint is, and making sure that this club is heading the right direction for that timeline. What is his timeline? I don't know right now, but I will say this, based off what we've seen, he probably is aware that with the division being in the state that it is, he needs to be focused on the future and the now, but he's going to have to probably make some decisions maybe fans won't like immediately, but could have some good returns down the road. And what exactly are some of those tough decisions? Well, I really have one in my set of notes here that I think would be a very tough decision, and one that could backfire a lot if things go well for this person that they would trade, but it would be something maybe they could consider. And I'm talking about Carter Hart, and if he decides to move on from him. Now, Carter's long-term stability seemed to be etched in stone just a couple seasons ago with the Flyers. Obviously, they made it to the 2nd round and were on the verge of playing in the 3rd round, because that year they didn't call it the conference final, they called it the 3rd round. To play the Tampa Bay Lightning, they would have played had they beaten the Islanders, and things were great, and Carter was going to be this guy in the net that allowed them to just go on and do great things. The situation's changed. Obviously, this team has not played well, and Hart has not played well recently too, and now just a few seasons ago you can kind of see how the mindset could have changed. Carter is an RFA after this season, so if Briere really is focused on doing just a clean out gutting and going out and doing a lot of the things you probably wouldn't want to do, you could possibly trade Hart. The bad news is you could be looking at him having a really good turnaround with another team. On the one hand, I kind of look at it like this: you would ideally like to keep a goalie in Hart that is young and looks to be a very talented goalie when things are going well, and you would like to have him for the long-term future. On the other hand, you probably would really like to get a big return for him if a team that was more of a contender or even just trying to make a wildcard push would say, hey, we want a young goalie that we know we can have RFA status for after this season. That could really be a good thing for us. That would be something to consider. I guess the one thing you really got to watch out for if you are Philly is if Hart has a bad season, what do you do with him? Because it might be hard to trade him, because a lot of people would say, well, he does have talent, but it's been, 4 years where it's not the ideal numbers to look at. So I do think it's one of those things that Danny will probably have to say, we have to make a decision within a certain time frame if things are going poorly. But if things are going well, I do think they have a little bit more time to work with, as teams could probably come to them near the deadline and say, hey, we would really like to see what you would want for Carter. But again, too, with him being an RFA, they could maybe wait a little bit longer, do a bridge extension, and see how things are going to work for both sides, because I do believe Carter Hart could have success in the NHL. Is it going to be in Philly, in the city of brotherly love? I couldn't tell you, but at the same time, with Briere, you also have to wonder with a possible rebuild or, just a longer term, whatever you want to call it, would Hart's timeline even fit with the club? And the final talking point is, will the Flyers actually get better? Philadelphia actually improved by 14 points last season, and by a lot of what you're seeing in this video, you're probably thinking, wow, Hockey Brigade, you think they're going to get a lot worse. Why would you say they're getting better? Well, there are a few reasons why they could theoretically finish with more points in a season. Two of the big ones being that you're looking at Sean Couturier is expected to come back after nearly not playing for almost 2 years. Couturier, when healthy, was a two-way force for Philadelphia, ended up winning a Selke, and could be a great boost for this lineup to have a two-way stud for your team. Is he going to give you 22 minutes a night right away? I think not, and from what I'm seeing, he might not even be ready for the start of the season. I thought I saw something the other day about him being injured, but to have Couturier out there could be a big boost for the team, as well as guys within the locker room say, it's good to see him out there on the ice after so long away. And then another guy that comes to mind is Cam Atkinson. And Cam, also from the trade from a few years ago, was a player that has had some big seasons. Has had even a 41-goal season, had a couple of 30-plus goal seasons, and is somebody that, really has been able to outperform expectations some years. If they were able to get him back and he was able to have one of those really good years out of nowhere, that would be a good thing for them, considering he did miss time last year. Can't remember how many games he missed, but I do think it was a good chunk of the season. But also, too, there's some other things, like Travis Konechny is coming off of a year where he either averaged over a point per game or was just at the mark. So looking at this, I think in general, their forward group could really get a boost from two guys that weren't really there in the lineup that were expected to be there. And then again, with some growth from within, Konechny, let's see what he does. If he is able to go out there and average another point per game type season, incredible stuff there. If Couturier is able to give you a Selke performance while also still having good offensive numbers, great there. If Cam is able to explode for a 35-plus goal season, that would be terrific too, and could see the club end up having more points than maybe you expected them to at the beginning of the year. So overall, what are my thoughts on the Flyers? Well, I'm going to be honest. I think if there was an NHL version of Hard Knocks, they would be one of the most entertaining teams to watch on it, but they're still not going to make the playoffs. I look at this club and I know that they've traded some guys out. They have some guys that they were expecting to be in the lineup that probably will never be in the lineup again. And looking at who they brought in this offseason, they just don't seem to have something that makes me scream, wow, that is a huge addition for them. They do have talent on this roster. Any team in the league probably has some form of talent, unless they're in the absolute midst of a terrible rebuild or a harsh rebuild. But the Flyers right now are a club that, if I have to say, hey, maybe they could really do something with a guy that hasn't played in 2 years and another guy that's 34 years old, they could theoretically play well, but you shouldn't have to be relying on a guy that hasn't played in 2 years and another guy to be a big performer for you at 34 years old. I'm a big Cam Atkinson fan, but Cam Atkinson is no Wayne Gretzky or anything like that. And so for this club, I think that this is going to be another year where they miss the playoffs. I don't think that's too shocking to talk about. And I do think Briere is probably going to have a decision where he might end up getting rid of a lot of these older guys for some assets for the future. There is some good news, though, if you are a fan of the gritty-led team. two big things. You are seeing some of these younger guys that are going to be coming out there on the ice. Kim York obviously was out there, Tyson Forster as well, and some of these other guys like Mishkov are going to be coming in the next few years. So there's a lot of good things. And then another thing is the Flyers actually have a good amount of money coming off the books in 2025. Are they going to have to sign some extensions to some guys that are going to be needing extensions by about that time? Yes. Could that be a little bit of money? Yes. But again, I do think that there are a little bit of sunshine rays coming down and smiling, making you smile if you are a Flyers fan. Even though this year I do think, again, is going to be another year without playoff hockey. But anyway, what are your thoughts for the Philadelphia Flyers for this upcoming season? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, alright. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.